not regard the Italian presidency's management of the Rome summit as a model of its kind. Far from it. It was much the same, as my right honourable friend the Prime Minister will recall, in Milan some 5 years ago. I do not regard it as in any sense wrong for Britain to make criticisms of that kind, plainly and courteously, nor in any sense wrong for us to do so, if necessary, alone. As I've already made clear, I have, like the Prime Minister and other right honourable friends, fought too many European battles in a minority of one to have any illusions on that score. But it is crucially important that we should conduct those arguments upon the basis of a clear understanding of the true relationship between this country, the community, and our community partners. And it is here, I fear, that my right honourable friend increasingly risks leading herself and others astray in matters of substance as well as of style. It was the late Lord Stockton, formerly Harold Macmillan, who first put the central point clearly. As long ago as 1962, he argued that we had to place and keep ourselves within the European community. He saw it as essential then, as it is today, not to cut ourselves off from the realities of power, not to retreat into a ghetto of sentimentality about our past, and so diminish our own control over our own destiny in the future. The pity is that the Macmillan view had not been perceived more clearly a decade before, in the 1950s. It would have spared us so many of the struggles of the last 20 years had we been in the community from the outset, had we been ready, in the much too simple phrase, to surrender some sovereignty at a much earlier stage. If we had been in from the start, as almost everybody now acknowledges, we should have had more, not less influence over the Europe in which we live today. We should never forget the lesson of that isolation, of being on the outside looking in for the conduct of today's affairs. We have done best when we've seen the community not as a static entity to be resisted and contained, but as an active process which we can shape, often decisively, provided we allow ourselves to be fully engaged in it, with confidence, with enthusiasm, and in good faith. We must at all costs avoid presenting ourselves yet again with an oversimplified choice, a false antithesis, a bogus dilemma between one alternative, starkly labelled cooperation between independent sovereign states, and a second, equally crudely labelled alternative, centralised federal superstate, as if there were no middle way in between. We commit a serious error if we think always in terms of surrendering sovereignty and seek to stand pat for all time on a given deal by proclaiming, as my right honourable friend the Prime Minister did 2 weeks ago, that we have surrendered enough. The European enterprise is not and should not be seen like that, as some kind of zero-sum game. Sir Winston Churchill put it much more positively 40 years ago when he said, "Is it not possible, and not less agreeable, to regard this sacrifice or merger of national sovereignty as the gradual assumption by all the nations concerned of that larger sovereignty which can alone protect their diverse and distinctive customs and characteristics and their national traditions?" I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that I find Winston Churchill's perception a good deal more convincing and more encouraging for the interests of our nation than the nightmare image sometimes conjured up by my right honourable friend, who seems sometimes to look out upon a continent that is positively teeming with ill-intentioned people, scheming, in her words, to extinguish democracy, to dissolve our national identities, to lead us through the back door into a federal Europe. What kind of vision is that, Mr. Speaker, for our business people who trade there each day, for our financiers who seek to make London the money capital of Europe, or for all the young people of today? These concerns are especially important as we approach the crucial topic of economic and monetary union. We must be positively and centrally involved in this debate, and not fearfully and negatively detached. The costs of disengagement here could be very serious indeed. There's talk, of course, of the emergence of a single currency for Europe. I agree that there are many difficulties about the concept, both economic and political. And of course, as I said in my own letter of resignation, none of us wants the imposition of a single currency. But that isn't the real risk. The 11 others cannot impose their solution on the 12th country against its will, so they can go ahead without us. The risk is not imposition, but isolation. The real threat is of leaving ourselves with no say in the monetary arrangements that the rest of Europe chooses for itself, with Britain once again scrambling to join the club later, after the rules have been set, and after the power has been distributed by others to our disadvantage. That would be the worst possible outcome. It is to avoid just that outcome, to find a compromise both acceptable in the government and sellable in Europe, that my right honourable friend the Chancellor has put forward his hard AQ proposal. This lays careful emphasis on the possibility that the hard AQ as a common currency could, given time, evolve into a single currency. I have, of course, supported the hard AQ plan. But after Rome, and after my right honourable friend's comments 2 weeks ago, there is grave danger that the hard AQ is becoming untenable. For two things have happened. The first was that my right honourable friend has appeared to rule out from the start any compromise at any stage on any of the basic components which all the 11 other countries believe to be a part of the EMU. A single currency or a permanently fixed exchange rate, a central bank or common monetary policy. Asked if we would veto any arrangement which jeopardised the pound sterling, my right honourable friend replied simply, yes. That statement means not that we can block EMU, but that they can go ahead without us. Is that a position that is likely to ensure, as I put it in my resignation letter, that we hold and retain a position of influence in this vital debate? I fear not. Rather, to do so, we must, as I said, take care not to rule in or rule out any one solution absolutely. We must be seen to be part of the same negotiation. The second thing that happened was, I fear, even more disturbing. Reporting to this House, my right honourable friend almost casually remarked that she didn't think many people would want to use the hard AQ anywhere, even as a common currency, let alone as a single one. It was remarkable. Indeed, it was tragic to hear my right honourable friend dismissing, with such personalised incredulity, the very idea that the hard AQ proposal might find growing favour among the peoples of Europe. Just as it was extraordinary to hear her assert that the whole idea of EMU might be open for consideration only by future generations. Mr. Speaker, those future generations are with us today. How on earth are the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England, commending the hard AQ as they strive to do, to be taken as serious participants in the debate against that kind of background noise? Mr. Speaker, I believe that both the Chancellor and the Governor are cricketing enthusiasts, so I hope there's no monopoly of cricketing metaphors. It's rather like sending your opening batsman to the crease, only for them to find, the moment the first balls are bowled, that their backs have been broken before the game by the team captain. The point, Mr. Speaker, is perhaps more sharply put by a British businessman trading in Brussels and elsewhere who wrote to me last week. People throughout Europe, he said, see our Prime Minister's finger wagging and hear her passionate no, 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 much more clearly than the content of the carefully worded formal texts. It is too easy, he went on, for them to believe that we all share her attitudes. For why else, he asked, has she been our Prime Minister for so long? This is, my correspondent concluded, a desperately serious situation for our country. And sadly, Mr. Speaker, I have to agree. The tragedy is, and it is for me personally, for my party, for our whole people, and for my right honourable friend herself, a very real tragedy. The Prime Minister's perceived attitude towards Europe is running increasingly serious risks for the future of our nation.